All right, well, this video is going to be about the Masterbuilt Gravity XT smoker, which is the one that I got to replace my old Camp Chef woodwind that I've had for like 7-8 years. The thing's put in good work, but it's gotten a little rusty in the bottom. The auger gets a little bound up, and
Hey, buddy.
I took the opportunity to get the new hot thing, right? So if you've been looking at getting one of these Gravity XTs, this might be a helpful video because I'm going to talk a lot about my experiences as a retail customer buying this thing with my own money. I'll do some head-to-head comparisons between the pellet grill and the charcoal smoker, so if you're interested in that, hang on. And I have had some mixed experiences. I'd say overall, I'm satisfied. I'm not going to say that I'm thrilled with the purchase, but I also don't regret it. Anyway, let's get into it and I'll tell you all about it. So the first thing I'll talk about is getting the thing in. So I bought this smoker from my local Ace Hardware, and they used forklift and put the whole thing, pallet and all, in the back of the truck. So I was not very bright, and I started putting the thing together, and I decided to unload it myself. That was a mistake. There was definitely this moment when I was unloading it out of the truck where it just hit me. I am not smart. Fortunately, God is merciful, and I was able to get out of that without blowing my back into pieces. And I started, moving the thing around back and doing the assembly. And here's my first opinions about Masterbuilt is the instruction manual and the assembly process. So overall, I'd give it a C. It could have been worse for sure, but it also could have been a lot better. Now, as far as like the way everything went together, that wasn't the problem. And if you're mechanically inclined, it won't be that bad, but the manual is all pictures. There's no real verbal explanations for anything. And sometimes the pictures don't really indicate what you're supposed to do very well. There's another problem in the pictures themselves. Again, they're relying solely on pictures to communicate, here's what you should do. And the pictures don't have much contrast, and they're all black and white, which makes it sometimes very difficult to see which particular part you're supposed to be using and how it's supposed to fit together. This leads to my next complaint, which is all of the pictures and all the parts have numbers and labels on the pictures. The parts themselves do not. So I think the blister pack hardware, that comes with labels, and the legs had labels on them. Nothing else had labels. So like all the number references from the pictures are worthless because the boxes don't have the numbers on them. The bags that the parts are in don't have the numbers on them, and the parts themselves don't have the numbers on them. So all of the references are totally useless. You just got to sort through everything and figure out what's what. And since the pictures aren't that great, it's sometimes just hard to see which part is this thing referring to in this picture, because I can't tell by looking at it. Overall, I did get the thing done, and I do have a strong recommendation here for anybody looking to get one of these. Honestly, anybody that's watching this video and you're the type of person that's interested in a smoker, probably you also would be interested in one of these tools. Let me tell you, getting yourself an electric screwdriver is a lifesaver because this thing required a ton of screws. This is the DeWalt DCF680. Man, this thing's been a fantastic purchase, and it really earned its money because some of those screws do take a little bit, and man, I'm telling you, my hands and forearms would have been killing me after putting this thing together. Instead, went together pretty easy. There were a couple of little manufacturing mistakes. The trim rings on the handles, one of them had a hole in it from where it looked like whenever it got pressed, it just tore the metal. Those pieces are purely cosmetic, and that part doesn't actually show, so I went ahead and used them. It wasn't that big a deal. There was also like one screw that was in a stupid place that I'm not sure what they were thinking when they put it there because it's really hard to get a screwdriver on. But overall, again, everything went together. We got it done. All I'm saying is Masterbuilt, you can do better. You can label your parts. You can make the pictures a little clearer. That's not going to cost you that much money. That could definitely be improved. So let's go outside and I'll give you an overview of the machine and show you some of the dimensions and kind of how it works. All right, so there it is. Let's give you the overview starting from the left. So you've got a fold-out shelf here with some hooks. There's also a little tray in here that I'm not really sure what that's supposed to be for. Also got a little swing out, I guess a towel holder or something. Your handle's down here on the bottom, and then your access door. You can open this, and then it's got a big tray in the bottom for cleaning. And then obviously your drip tray, that just slides right out. So you need to clean it. But all that's pretty good. Folding shelf in front. The hinge system's a little interesting. When this thing opens, it doesn't just swing up. It's kind of got some articulation on the hinges, so it actually kind of rolls back instead of just flipping up. There's your interior. You've got multiple racks that it comes with different levels of rack stations. Internal cook chamber. I cooked on this thing last night. It's a little dirty. All right, on the right-hand side, there's the controller. You've got your vent control here to open and close. This controls both the air intake and the heat going into the chamber, both with the same vent, so it's not independent. The air intake fan down here, and of course that's going to suck air into your burn chamber, and then it feeds the air back through here. All of this side is all sealed up, so the only outlet where the heat can go is through the chamber. Charcoal hopper in the top. You can fit maybe not a full bag, 20-pound bag of charcoal in here, but quite a bit. There are fire bricks in the bottom for insulation at the bottom. This thing is all sealed, like I said, so the air can't come out. I haven't noticed any significant leaking. It does seem to seal pretty well. And then here's your starter chamber and where the ashes collect. So you've got the removable ash canister, and then this holds your starters. So you can pull that out, obviously, for cleaning and access. There's the, again, the vent for the intake. So you just put you some starters in there, light them, lights the bottom of your charcoal. And then obviously once everything's good and going, the controller can regulate the air cycling through, and that's how it regulates the temperature. So let me get you some dimensions on this thing. So full width, a little under 4 feet, about 46 inches with the doors and everything. Like I said, probably a good 4 feet. As far as depth, you know, not quite 2 feet. And again, I'm not quite getting everything. I would say give yourself at least 2 feet on the depth. And on the height, again, roughly 4'4", 4.5 feet, rough dimensions. Internal cook chamber. So you got a good 16 inches at the bottom. On the cook racks, it's a little less. You get about 15 on those. Width, again, on the bottom, about 27 inches, but now some of that is going to be occluded by the little supports. So I'd say about 24 inches of actual cooking width where you could really put something. On the top, that means you get a little bit more, closer to 26. And again, that's like useful area there. The rack adjustments are spaced out. See, this bottom is about 3 inches off the bottom, the next one about 3 inches up from that, and then the next one about 3.5 inches. So you get a little bit of rack adjustment, but if you have them all lumped together, they do get pretty tight in there. But they're really made so that you can move them around to kind of get stuff at the appropriate height that you want. There at the back, you can see the thermal probe. It is kind of right in line with this first rack position, just maybe a little above it in between. So that's where it takes your temperature. It is at the back. By the way, with the full racks out, you're looking at closer to 5 feet on the width, and the depth, a little over 2.5 feet deep once you got the front rack out. The front rack, by the way, let's see, what do we got? About 29 inches long, and not quite 11 inches deep. Side rack, about 19 inches with about 16 inches of usable kind of depth there. We'll say one thing about this front, because of where the handle is not very far here. You've only got, 3.5 inches of clearance, and the way this thing swings, about this much is not super usable right here in the middle. I don't really care for that. So you really, like, you can't put a plate here because whenever that thing goes to close, the plate is like right there. And so if you got like meat and stuff, you don't want to hit your handle with it because that'd be dirty and gross. And so, you know, that's one issue. Is this shelf is nice to have, obviously, but it could be a little deeper to be a little bit more usable. All right, so I got it moved out from under the eaves. Let's get this thing going for a little cook. So once you turned it on, setting the temperature, and once you make sure we open the flue, there we go. All right, set at 250. So I've got this thing loaded up with some lump charcoal from Rockwood. So close that. Let that burn for a good couple minutes to make sure it's good and lit. So once I shut this door, hear it beep, and now the fan's gonna kick on. And now we should start seeing the temperatures climb. So see how long this thing takes to get up to 250. Should be pretty quick. I mean, maybe 10 minutes. So. All right, so now let's talk about side-by-side cooking tests versus the pellet grill. Here's been my experience. So I did 3 different side-by-side tests: chicken, pork, and beef. So the first one was spatchcock chicken. I got them at the same time from the same store, cooked them side by side at the same time. The one thing that I'll point out here is I was using a smoke tube with the pellet grill for this cook, and what I found is that chicken cooks very fast. And so there wasn't a ton of smoke flavor on either one of these chickens. However, the pellet grill did produce a little bit more color in the quick cook than the charcoal did. It wasn't that dramatic, and it really didn't make that much difference in the flavor profiles. They were exceptionally similar, I would say, was my overall takeaway. There just wasn't that much difference cooking chicken on either one of these. So next up, I did some pork ribs. So these were a set of baby back ribs out of the same package, bought at Costco. Cooked them at the same time. Again, I did use the smoke tube on the pellet grill, and again, it did produce a little bit more color than the charcoal did. Same story this time as with the chicken. The flavor differences were not that dramatic. I just didn't taste that much of a difference between the pellets and the charcoal, which I know is surprising because everybody screams up and down that there's a night and day difference between pellets and charcoal and which one they prefer. My experience, it didn't make that big of a difference. Then we move into the beef, and for this I used chuck roast, again, bought at Costco, came out of the same package, cooked at the same time side by side. Now this took a lot longer than either the chicken or the pork, and so with this longer cook, I did not use a smoke tube on the pellet grill because I'd become a little concerned in the first 2 cooks that maybe that was an unfair advantage. It is true, I use a smoke tube when I smoke on my pellet grill, but, you know, let's see what they'll do direct head to head. And it turns out the color difference wasn't that big. Again, this is a long cook. It took like 8 hours or something for these chucks to cook. And in that long of a time period, they both achieved very good barks, very dark color. For the flavor in this one, I do think the charcoal gave a smokier flavor. And as a matter of fact, I took some of this over to friends and they blind taste tested. I didn't tell them which was which, and they both said the one that was cooked over charcoal had smokier flavor. Now, I thought that there was a small difference. I did not think it was a dramatic difference, but it was there. So there's my opinion on taste differences. Charcoal may give you a bit more inherent smokiness. With a smoke tube, I actually think there's not that much difference, but if you really want like super smoke flavor, you could use a smoke tube in the Gravity XT as well. The most dramatic difference though, because there was one that I haven't mentioned yet, smoke ring. The charcoal produced a far deeper and darker smoke ring in the meat. Even on the chicken, as fast as it cooked, I could tell a little bit more of a pinkness or ruddiness to the tones in the chicken. Even though it wasn't as dark, there was that kind of red smoke ring kind of start even in the chicken cook. Now on the ribs and especially the beef, it was a dramatic difference in the smoke ring. So if you're a big smoke ring person, man, that Gravity XT and the charcoal will get you an almost artificially colored looking smoke ring. It's so vibrant and intense. Now, moving on from like taste differences, let's talk about use and actually my experience using the Gravity XT. So overall, I found that when you get the temperature stable on the Gravity XT, it was more temperature stable than my pellet grill. There's some big caveats there. So number one, I experienced quite a bit of temperature overshoot on the Gravity XT anytime I changed the temperature. So like when starting it up, it always overshot the set point temperature. Whenever I was smoking at 225 and then I wanted to add some final finishing color and I'd crank that thing up to 300 or 350, it would overshoot the set point. My pellet grill doesn't do that. It gets up to the set point and that's it. Now, it has a little bit more inherent fluctuation, but I would much rather have that because the fluctuation of smoker, if it's within 25 degrees, that's not the end of the world. But man, whenever you're overshooting your temperature by 50 degrees or sometimes even more, and that brings in the next problem, it didn't come down sometimes. I had some temperature ramping where it was just uncontrolled and I couldn't keep the temperature down. So what I had to do is I had to go out and actually manually close the vent damper down to get the temperatures back down sometimes. And that was kind of frustrating because the whole point of buying one of these temperature controlled outdoor smokers is that you don't have to babysit it. And you don't once you get the temperature where you want it. But again, with the overshoot and the fact that sometimes the temperature just wouldn't come back down, that was a bit of a frustration that I didn't enjoy. And then a related problem that may or may not be a permanent issue was on the long chuck cook. I had some rain late in the cook and that made the Gravity XT lose its mind. I think it's a probe fault. I'm not sure though, not yet. So basically what happened is when the rain hit, the Gravity XT thought all of a sudden within minutes from a temperature of like 350, the temperature reading went to 94 degrees in like a couple of minutes, which is just not possible. It just so happened that this was one of my side-by-side tests, so I actually had my fireboard running an extra probe inside of the Gravity XT, so I know what the temperature actually was, and it was just an erratic reading. But the Gravity XT controller didn't know that, so it starts trying to crank the temperature in compensation, and so I had this like brief 20-30 minute period where the erratic temperatures would cause it to read like 100 degrees, then 400 degrees, and it's trying to offset this stuff, and the temperatures kind of went nuts. And that was a real frustrating experience. Now, I reached out to Masterbuilt customer support, and their initial response was not great. They initially basically said, oh, you're not supposed to use this in the rain. It's not supposed to be subject to any moisture whatsoever. And that's kind of unreasonable in my opinion because this is an outdoor product. And their manual actually explicitly states, do not use this under the patio. Don't use this under ceilings or roofs or tents or gazebos. Don't put it under stuff because that's a fire hazard. Okay, so it's supposed to be outside, uncovered, and it's a smoker, which means it might be sitting there for 12 hours during the cook. That's the intended use case. The expectation that there's never going to be any water on there, totally unreasonable. That's just my opinion. So after a couple days going back and forth, I finally did get a phone call and that went much better. The guy was from Georgia. It took about 10 minutes. He's like, yeah, you're not supposed to use them in the water, but I mean, rain is kind of an inevitable thing sometimes. So they are sending me a new probe and a new controller. The downside, it will be maybe months until I get them because they're on back order. But they are taking care of it, and we'll see in the long run whether this ends up being an issue. If it is, I will report back. But I will say in the dry, without that problem, the erratic temperature readings aren't an issue. But this does lead into a couple of other quirks, comments on using this machine. So on temperature stability, I mentioned whenever you get the temperature set, it is rather stable. It's more stable than my pellet grill. However, the controller and the app falsely minimize the variation, I think, because they actually report at times ruler flat temperatures. And I mean, not 1 degree of fluctuation for hours. And again, I had other probes double checking stuff, and that's just not the case. So they were basically eliminating variation, I think, artificially just in the display so that the customer thinks they're getting this ruler flat line of temperature stability when the actual smoker temperatures are fluctuating 5 or 10 degrees. Now, that's not the end of the world, and that may be their opinion. Is Masterbuilt may be thinking, well, we don't want to show people variation that's meaningless, and yeah, the temperature is up or down 10 degrees, but they don't need to know that because it's not that big a deal. But I want to know the real temperatures. I have a problem with just not displaying accurate data, so that was something that I was disappointed to see. It's not like a deal breaker, but it's frustrating. The app itself, I didn't enjoy that much. I think their app is a little too basic. It doesn't have very many features. It tended to drop connection, so I kept having to refresh the data feed. The controller works pretty well, and it's very user-friendly, but again, I prefer the Fireboard app and system. It gives better data. There's more advanced features there. Again, that's just my opinion. And I will say, I wish that that vent that sometimes I had to use to manually kind of damp down the temperature, I wish that were made to be more intentionally partially adjustable, because that thing seems to only be made to be like open or shut all the way. And it would be nice to have it kind of where you could maybe even just crank the handle and it would lock into a position. I think that would be better, because I do feel like that kind of thermal runaway situation, it could happen. I mean, there are times when that smoker seems to be drafting so much air that the fan shuts off and the temperature keeps climbing, and at that point there's nothing the controller can do. And the way the vent adjust works, there's no real way to be sure that you've got it set at a partial position that it will stay, and so I think that would be nice. Or optimally, the controller would actually be able to mechanically adjust the vent itself. That would be another control point for temperature regulation, but anyway, that's something that would cost them more, so it is what it is. Related to the vent issue, I have found that the smoker seems to use more fuel than the pellet grill. As far as pound for pound, I feel like I'm going through more charcoal than I am pellets on the same kind of cook. And this is something with that vent that you do have to be very careful about when you shut the gravity smoker off. The charcoal has no way to extinguish itself except for the vent getting fully closed. So the way it's supposed to shut off is when you close those vents, the charcoal burns all the oxygen out of the firebox and self-extinguishes. If you don't get that vent all the way closed, it can keep burning. It can burn up all your charcoal. So it's very important to get that vent all the way shut. But even when I did that, it still felt like I was going through a bit more fuel. What I've found is that charcoal and pellets cost fairly similar amounts of money. If anything, pellets seem to be even cheaper. And so with that, it feels like you're probably going to be spending a little bit more money on fuel with the Gravity XT as compared to a pellet grill. So next up, I'll talk about some nitpicks in use. And one of those is the lid and the front shelf. So the way the lid opens and the size of the front shelf is kind of small. If you're doing like a big, baking sheet and you've got your barbecue set out ready to put it on the grill, I mean, I'm going to put it on that front shelf, but that handle and the way the lid shuts, the shelf's just not got enough space, and the height between the handle and the shelf is too small. So if you got like a Boston butt or something, that handle's gonna hit it whenever you slide it on there, and that's kind of gross. So you end up having to like set it over to the side, open the thing up, then move it over, and then move the meat into the cook chamber. That's a bit of a hassle. I wish the handle were a little higher or that front shelf were a little deeper. That would kind of take care of some of that. And next, on the shelves themselves inside, they adjust, and that's good, but they adjust too easily, and that's bad. And what I mean by that is, whenever you go to put the meat in there, the shelves can be very tight, and yeah, you can adjust them, but that adjustability can be a bad thing when you need to rearrange things because they slide so easily. And since the racks come in two pieces, each one is only like 6 to 8 inches. And like there's times when I need to move something around and they slide so easily they start to partially come out and then they'll like kind of can't. And so it's just, I found myself having to fiddle with those racks a lot. The other thing is because the front opens and it doesn't like hinge up, you don't have like top down access like I do on my pellet grill. And so that made like spraying water or, vinegar or something on your barbecue while it's smoking, because sometimes that's what you do, kind of hard to get to. And that's not the end of the world. None of this is the end of the world. It's just a little bit of nitpicks and things that, you want to be aware of. I would say with the sliding grates, it would be nice if the end of the rack holders had like a little bend on them so that the racks didn't slide as easily, so you had to like lift them before they'd slide out. Because again, whenever you're moving stuff around, every time it feels like I'm having to readjust the racks because they're trying to fall out of the grill. And that's just frustrating. And another little kind of nitpick, the wheels. The wheels could be bigger on this thing. My patio is all pavers, and so trying to roll it across that, the wheels get kind of stuck. And so I would appreciate maybe the casters being a little bigger. And look, those are expensive actually, so I get it, but you can roll it, and if you've got like concrete, it's perfect. But if you've got any sort of tile that's got grout lines, that's probably not an issue unless it's deep. With pavers, that's where it starts to kind of get hung up a little, and that was just a little nickel. So I guess let me get to the summary, the pros and the cons, if you will, of this kind of gravity smoker versus the pellet grill in my experience, specifically with the Masterbuilt Gravity XT. So let's start off with the cons, and then I'll talk about the pros because there is upside here. So the cons, obviously, I don't like the app. I think the controller could be better. If the water issue is not resolved, to me, that is the most significant issue, and that's probably a deal breaker in my opinion. If you can't expect your outdoor smoker to be able to handle a little bit of rain, that's just totally unusable, because heat showers in the summer are a thing. And when something's sitting outside for 12 hours during the summer, it's gonna occasionally get a little bit of rain on it, and you can't have the thing freaking out. And then you have to go babysit it and make sure that it's not burning your stuff to a crisp. Again, that's the whole purpose of getting one of these smokers and having a controller on it, so you don't have to do that kind of thing, because people got lives to lead. I do think the rack system could have been a little bit better for that adjustability not causing problems. Again, it's not a huge issue, more of a nitpick, but it's just something to be aware of. It does seem to use a little bit more fuel than a pellet grill. The Gravity XT controller specifically does have that temperature overshoot. I don't know that the new controller will do better, because that didn't seem to be a malfunction. That just seemed to be, it doesn't seem to, maybe it's prioritizing speed to get to the smoke point rather than something else. I mean, whenever you open the door, you lose a little bit. So maybe that's their theory, is we'd rather overshoot on heat up, because then when the person goes to put their meat into the smoker, it will naturally come back down some due to loss. But I would rather it just get to the set point and not overshoot. The temperature ramping, again, is maybe not a malfunction from the controller's point of view. It's just something the controller can't help. And that's more of a mechanical design thing. And so that's where I think the answer is, you might have to start off or keep that vent more partially closed rather than treating it as like an on-off, which everything in the manual and everything I read about this treats the vent as an on-off rather than something that you actually use to control the temperature. Again, the theory of the machine is the controller does everything for you. I found that I have had to use that vent adjustment almost every cook. Unless you're blasting the temperature, if you're trying to keep that temperature down 200, 250, 225, you might need to be using that vent control, which, again, nothing in the manual indicates that that's how it's supposed to be. Don't expect moving from a pellet grill to a charcoal smoker to change the world. It might, but they also might not be as different as you expect. At the end of the day, when something burns, especially pellets and wood, they turn into carbon, right? And charcoal burns and it's carbon. And so that whole process is more similar than you might think. And at the end of the day, the flavor differences might be there, but they also might be less insane and like convincing than you want them to be. I thought there would be a much more dramatic difference in the taste than there really was. So I would say I think a lot of people don't give pellet grills enough respect. They do a much better job than I think what you read on the internet sometimes will lead you to believe. The last thing in the cons list, I will say price. This is not a cheap machine, and I haven't really gotten into that too much yet. A lot of my nitpicks originate from the fact that I spent $1,600 on this. I paid my own money. I paid full retail. I didn't get a deal on this. I just bought it myself. And for that much money, I do expect perfect temperature stability. I do expect that machine to get to temperature without overshooting my target. I don't expect thermal runaway problems. I didn't expect a probe to freak out in the rain. And that's, I think, my main criticism. Whenever you hear these things, if they seem like I'm being really nitpicky, well, $1,600. You've got some alternatives at $1,600. You could go get an old country smoker. They've got a gravity model that costs about that much money. It's not automated, but what use is having a controller if you've still got to babysit your machine and adjust the vent, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. That's what an offset already does. And so you can already get an offset gravity smoker without a controller that you have to babysit and adjust the vent to control the temperatures. And frankly, if you get one of those old country smokers, spend another, I don't know, 300 bucks on a fireboard controller and a fan, you can have that thing and it's probably going to be better than this. Probably. Now, I don't know, there's probably some trade-offs there, but again, $1,600 is not cheap. My Camp Chef Woodwind does not have thermal runaway problems. It does not overshoot temperature targets, and it cost way less when I bought that thing. So just keep that in mind, it's expensive. Now, let's wrap up with the pros, right? The good points, the things that keep me from saying this was a bad purchase. Number one, it does a very good job smoking. When you get that temperature set, it is very stable. It is more temperature stable than my pellet grill once it's locked in. And I mean, generally speaking, within 10 degrees of your set point, it's maintaining that. It gets up to temperature fast. So I cooked a steak last night at 500 degrees. From the time I lit the smoker to 500 degrees was 17 minutes. I mean, that's including like waiting for the thing to get going. Like once you get that thing going, it moves to get to temperature. And it is capable of getting very, very hot. My pellet grill cannot get much above 400. And when it's cold out, it has a hard time getting above 350. The charcoal has no problem at all hitting 500. It's not even breaking a sweat. And I'm guessing whenever they say it'll get 700, I believe them. I'm pretty sure it'll get real dang hot. And it will get there real fast. The build quality of the machine, pretty darn good. I felt like it feels solid, it feels well insulated, it seems to be durable. The shelves are made well, they fit together well, they seem to be sturdy. Yeah, I wish the front shelf was a little bigger, but that side shelf is fantastic. And so, you know, as far as the overall build, I don't see heat leaking out from the charcoal area, the hopper. It seems to be pretty well sealed. The firebox seems to be pretty well sealed. Again, everything worked right out of the box. Everything went together. Again, it seems to be a very good mechanical system and the quality seems to be there. You're getting, I think, the extra from the price above Masterbuilt's other models. It does seem to have that higher level of build quality, that heavier, like more durable thing it's got. It doesn't feel like a cheap Walmart grill, I'll say that much. And, you know, lastly, like I said, the flavors are very, very good. It produces very good smoked meats, and that smoke ring is unbelievable. I mean, professional level smoke rings coming off that thing. So if you're a big visual eater, you love the look of perfect barbecue, it gets there better than the pellet grill. And I think that's one of the criticisms people have with pellet grills, and I think it's a bit misleading on what a pellet grill can do, is sometimes pellet grill barbecue doesn't look the part. There's times when pellets burn too clean and you don't get the good exterior color and you don't get that deep smoke ring. Well, with the charcoal gravity system, that is not a problem. You're gonna get smoke rings for dang sure. And on a long cook, you're definitely gonna get that nice dark color. So overall, I am not disappointed. As long as we get that temperature issue with the rain sorted, I'll be okay. I can deal with the temperature overshoot. That's mostly just an issue at startup. And now that I know it's there, I can adjust that damper flap to kind of minimize that issue. That is kind of the answer there. I'm enjoying the product that I'm getting off of it. It does have a lot more utility than a pellet grill in that I can cook at very high temperatures. I also have a gas grill for that, but it's a nice tool to have in the box, that I've got this other thing, because sometimes at the end of a long smoke session, you really want to put a good crust and bark. You can crank that thing up to 350 and it'll get there in a hurry. You can really caramelize the exterior and it'll do it quick, and you don't have to move it over to the grill. You can just do it on your smoker. So that's gonna wrap this thing up. If you've got any comments, feedback, suggestions, if I've totally screwed something up or misunderstood something, that's totally possible. But, I'm always interested in hearing people's feedback on this type of stuff. So feel free to leave a comment down below. As always, I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.